Some stories begin with hope and end in despair. Others start in darkness and crawl toward light. This tale belongs to the second kind, the kind that reminds us that even in our deepest valleys, providence sometimes arrives on iron-rimmed wheels. It happened in Texas, 18 when the frontier was still raw and women without protection were no more than shadows in alleyways. Sarah Morrison had been somebody's wife once, somebody's hope for the future. But death and deception had stripped her down to her last truth 3 days without food. Behind a boarding house that had turned her away, in a town that pretended not to see her. What happened next wasn't pretty or romantic. It was survival, pure and simple. And sometimes that's the most honest form of grace. Sarah's fingers scraped against the brick wall, catching on rough mortar that tore what remained of her fingernails. The cook had just thrown out the evening scraps, beef bones with strings of meat still clinging, potato peelings, half a loaf of bread, too stale for tomorrow's breakfast. The pile steamed in the cool night air, no more than 6 feet away. 6 feet! Might as well have been 6 miles. She pressed her spine harder against the wall, using it to keep herself upright. Her legs had stopped cooperating sometime during the second night. Now they were just weight, folded beneath her like broken sticks. The smart thing would be to crawl. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. But her arms wouldn't push her forward. 3 days without food had made decisions for her what muscles would work, what wouldn't, what mattered, and what was just foolish dignity. The alley dog watching from behind the rain barrel understood. It waited too, patient as death, knowing she'd either move away or become part of the scenery. Either way, the dog would eat tonight. Church bells rang out, 9 strikes. Late enough that decent folk were inside. Early enough that the saloon crowd hadn't spilled into the streets yet. The perfect time for shadows to conduct their business. She's still breathing. The voice came from her left, male. Young enough to think this was entertaining. Sarah didn't turn her head. That would cost energy she didn't have. Seen her hand move about an hour ago. Second voice, older, with the wet cough of a man who spent too much time in dusty spaces. Bet she don't last till morning. Boots on packed dirt, coming closer. The first man squatted beside her, bringing the smell of chewing tobacco and unwashed clothes. His hand grabbed her jaw, turned her face toward the lamplight spilling from the saloon's back door. Still got all her teeth. That's something. Sarah tried to pull away, but his fingers held firm, checking her like a horse at auction. The other man laughed, a sound like water going down a broken drain. You planning on keeping her? Might be worth something to Big Jack. He's always looking for... The sentence stopped. Both men went still. That particular kind of stillness that meant trouble had arrived. Sarah heard it too. Wagon wheels on cobblestone, the steady clop of draft horses, the creak of leather traces. Not a freight wagon. She'd heard plenty of those pass by. This was smaller, personal, a ranch wagon. Evening, gentlemen. The new voice was quiet, controlled. It came from above her, a man still mounted or standing in his wagon. The fingers released her jaw, and she slumped back against the wall. Just checking if she needed help, the younger man said. His boots shuffled backward. Thought she might be sick, or step back to... 2 words, not shouted, not threatened, just stated like facts that would become true one way or another. Sarah forced her eyes to focus on the newcomer. He stood beside his wagon, one hand casual on his hip where a pistol would sit. His coat was dark buffalo hide, maybe, and his hat threw shadows across his face. But his stance told the story clear enough. This was a man comfortable with violence, bored by it even. The 2 men backed away, muttering excuses that didn't need finishing. Their footsteps faded toward the saloon, leaving Sarah alone with the stranger. He studied her for a long moment, taking inventory. Then he stepped closer, squatted where the other man had been. But he didn't touch her, just looked. You got people. Sarah tried to answer, but her throat produced only a clicking sound. She shook her head. Work. Another shake. Can you stand? This time she didn't even try to respond. The answer was obvious. He stood, walked to his wagon, returned with a canteen. He didn't hold it to her lips like some fairy tale prince. Just put it in her hands and waited to see if she could manage. She could, barely. The water hit her stomach like a fist, but she kept it down. Got 2 boys need tending, he said. Their ma died 2 years back, pays $1 a week plus board. You interested? Sarah nodded before her mind could form questions. $1 a week was nothing. Board was everything. Can you speak at all? She shaped the word carefully, pushed it through her damaged throat. Yes, good enough. He lifted her then, efficient as moving a sack of grain. Not gentle, but not rough either. Just practical. The wagon bed was half full of supplies, bags of flour, cornmeal, salt, tuk-tuk. He set her between them, pulled a wool blanket from under the driver's bench, threw it over her. It's an hour to the ranch. Try not to die on the way. She wanted to tell him she wasn't planning on dying, not after making it 3 days. But he'd already climbed onto the bench, clicked to the horses. The wagon lurched forward, and Sarah grabbed the sideboard to keep from rolling. Above, stars punctured the black sky like promises she didn't believe in anymore. The wagon wheels found their rhythm, iron on stone, then dirt, then gravel. The town sounds faded. The man didn't speak again, didn't look back to check on her. She appreciated that. Pity would have broken something inside her that hunger hadn't touched. They passed other wagons heading to town, freight haulers, late travelers. Their lanterns swung past without stopping. Sarah pulled the blanket over her face, not from shame, just tired of being seen without being helped. Still breathing back there. His first words in 20 minutes. Sarah made a sound that might have been, yes, good. Boys wake at 5. They'll expect breakfast. The wagon turned, wheels crunching over different ground. A gate creaked. Dogs barked, then quieted at his whistle. Lamplight appeared ahead. Windows of a house, warm yellow against the dark. One more thing, he said as the wagon stopped. I don't care what you did or didn't do to end up in that alley, but you bring trouble to my ranch. You'll be back there before sunset. Clear, she managed. Then welcome to the Circle T. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The Mexican woman appeared in the doorway before Jake could call out. Lamplight caught the silver threads in her black hair, pulled back tight from a face mapped with sun lines. She looked from Jake to the wagon bed, her expression shifting from expectation to assessment. Another one, her English came out careful, each word placed like stones across water. This one's different, Maria. Jake lifted Sarah from the wagon, her weight nothing to him, 90 pounds maybe, mostly bones and stubborn life. She needs food first. Then the room. Maria stepped aside. The kitchen heat hit Sarah's face like an open-hand wood smoke. Beef fat, coffee burned to the bottom of the pot. Jake set her in a chair at the scarred pine table. Her spine wouldn't hold. She gripped the table edge, splinters driving into her palms. Maria ladled something from a pot on the stove. Broth, beef bone, onion, salt. She set it down without ceremony, stood back with her arms crossed. Sarah's hands shook too hard to hold the spoon steady. Brown liquid splattered on the table. She tried again. More spills. Her stomach cramped, demanding and refusing at the same time. Despacio. Maria took the spoon, not gentle, but not unkind. Slow. She fed Sarah like feeding a sick calf, small amounts, waiting between each spoonful. The broth coated Sarah's raw throat. Her stomach clenched, held, accepted. Movement in the doorway. 2 pale faces, one above the other. Boys. The older one 8. Jake had said stood with his hand on the younger one's shoulder, holding him back. Both had their father's sharp jaw, their dead mother's wheat-colored hair, probably. They stared at Sarah like she was something that might bite. Daniel? Tommy? Jake's voice carried no warmth. Bed. They vanished. Bare feet padded down the hallway. A door closed. They've seen too many leave, Maria said, still spooning broth. They don't trust no more? Jake pulled out a chair, its legs scraping across the floor. She'll need the small room. Same arrangement as before. The others weren't dying in an alley. He stood. 5 o'clock, Miss Carson. Maria leaves after breakfast. Boys know their routine, but they need watching. Tommy especially, he wanders. Sarah's throat worked. Carson. Your name now? Had a cousin named Carson once. Close enough to true. He moved toward the door. Stopped. You run. You starve. You stay. You work. Choose now. The spoon clinked against the bowl. Maria waited. The clock on the mantel ticked. Somewhere in the house. A child whispered through the wall. Sarah lifted her head. I stay. Maria's hand closed around Sarah's wrist, checking the pulse. Her fingers were rough from lye soap, steady as fence posts. She need more food tomorrow. Tonight, sleep. Jake nodded. The room's ready, always ready. They never stay long enough to mess it. The words hung between them like washing on a line. Jake's jaw tightened. Maria didn't look away. Help her up. Sarah pushed against the table, legs shaking like a newborn foal's. Maria's arm went under her shoulder, taking most of the weight. They moved through the kitchen, past the cast-iron stove still radiating heat, past shelves lined with preserving jars, past a door that led to what must be a pantry. The floor changed from wood to something else under Sarah's feet. Smooth, cold, tiles maybe. The hallway was narrow, dark except for the lamp Maria carried. 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right. The boys' whispers leaked through the first door, quick, worried sounds. She's skinny, skinnier than the last one. The last one only stayed a week. Maybe this one. Hush, now. Maria's voice cut through the wood. The whispering stopped. The room was at the end of the hall. Small, maybe 8 feet by 10. A narrow bed pushed against one wall. Cornhusk mattress, rustling, when Sarah sank onto it. A washstand with a chipped ceramic basin. 2 pegs on the wall holding worn dresses. 1 brown, 1 gray. A chamber pot with a fitted lid tucked in the corner. A single window, closed, looking out on darkness. Maria set the lamp on the washstand. Water in the pitcher, privy out back, 30 steps from the kitchen door. You strong enough? Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure. Tomorrow, you wash. Tonight, sleep. Maria moved to the door. Stopped. The boys, they good boys? But they test you. Don't let them. She left, taking most of the light with her. Sarah heard her footsteps fade, heard Jake's voice in the kitchen, too low to make out words. A door closed, boot steps on the porch, heavy and deliberate. Then quiet, except for the house settling, wood adjusting to night's temperature. Sarah's fingers found the lamp, turned the wick up slightly. The room emerged from shadows. Clean. That was what struck her. The floor swept, the window glass clear of dust, the blankets on the bed patched but washed. Someone, Maria, probably maintained this room between failures. Between women who couldn't last, she stood gripping the washstand. Her reflection in the window glass stopped her cold. Hollow cheeks, dark patches under eyes that looked too large, hair matted and filthy. She looked like her mother had looked, near the end. The comparison made her stomach clench. The door had a latch, simple hook and eye, but it would hold. She tested it, metal clicking against metal. From inside, she controlled it. That was something. Her fingers fumbled with her dress buttons. The fabric was stiff with dried sweat, alley dirt, things she didn't want to name. It peeled away from her skin, taking some smell with it. She used water from the pitcher, the cloth from beside it, cold water, but clean. She scrubbed until her skin stung. The gray dress from the peg was too large, made for someone who ate regular meals. But it was clean, smelled of sun and lye soap. The fabric felt strange against her clean skin, foreign but not unwelcome. She tested the window latch next. It turned, stuck, turned again with pressure. The window would open if needed, another escape route. Though escape to what she'd already been in the what, dying against brick and mortar. The bed creaked when she lay down. Corn husks shifting and settling. The blankets were wool, scratchy but warm, real warmth, not the fever warmth of starvation. Her body seemed to sink through the mattress, through the floor, through the earth itself. Footsteps overhead. Jake, probably, checking whatever needed checking. A house this size would have an upstairs. Maybe his room up there, or had been his and his wife's. Now just his. Something scratched at her door, light, tentative. She held her breath. "Is she dead?" Tommy's whisper. The younger boy. "Shut up." Daniel, trying to sound older than 8. "Go back to bed." But what if she's dead? Like, she's not dead. I can hear her breathing. Sarah could hear them breathing too, pressed against her door, probably. 2 boys who'd lost their mother, lost 3 attempts at replacement. What did that do to children? Made them careful, probably. Made them not trust. Father said her name's Mrs. Carson. Tommy again. That's not her real name. How do you know? Because he said the same thing about the second one, Mrs. Carson. Like we're stupid. Bare feet padding away. Their door closing. Oh, sure. Then Tommy's voice through the wall, clear as if he stood beside her bed. What if she's mean? Then she won't last either. Sarah's eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling beams. 5 o'clock, Jake had said. 5 hours from now, maybe less. She needed to sleep, needed strength for morning, but her mind kept turning over those words. She won't last either. 3 women before her, all failed, fled, or been sent away. What had they done wrong? Too soft, too hard, too much like the dead mother, not enough like her. The clock in the main room chimed. 11? No, 10. She'd lost count. Her stomach cramped again, adjusting to food after 3 days empty. The broth sat heavy, but stayed down. Tomorrow there would be more food. Tomorrow there would be work. Tomorrow she would meet those boys properly. Try to prove she was different from the others, but different how she didn't know these boys, didn't know what they needed, didn't know what Jake expected beyond the basics fed, clean, learning letters, didn't know what had driven the others away. The lamplight flickered, wick burning low. She should turn it off, save oil. But the dark felt too much like the alley, too much like giving up. She left it burning, watching shadows dance on the ceiling. A sound from the kitchen made her tense. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside her door. No knock, no words, just breathing on the other side of the wood. Jake Maria. Someone else. The latch held firm in its hook, but latches were just courtesy. Any determined man could break through if he wanted. The breathing continued, then footsteps again, moving away. A door opened and closed. Silence. Sarah pulled the blanket higher, fingers gripping the rough wool. 5 o'clock would come soon enough. But first, she had to survive the night. And in this house of motherless boys and desperate replacements, she wasn't sure which would be harder, the work or the watching, the constant measuring against ghosts. 3 women had tried and failed. What made her think she'd be any different? The lamps sputtered, oil running low. In the thinning light, she noticed something she'd missed before. scratches on the wall beside the bed. Deliberate marks, 4 sets of vertical lines, someone counting days. The last group stopped at 7. The rooster's crow pulled Sarah from sleep that felt like drowning, dark still. But the kitchen sounds had already started, coffee pot clanking against the stove. Heavy footsteps, a chair scraping. Jake, getting ready to leave. Sarah's body protested every movement. 3 days of starvation had eaten muscle along with fat. She dressed in yesterday's borrowed gray dress, fingers clumsy with the buttons. The mirror showed truth she didn't want to see, hair like straw, skin stretched over bone. She used water from the pitcher, smoothed her hair back, tied it with a piece of twine from the washstand drawer. The kitchen glowed with lamplight and stove heat. Jake stood at the counter, coffee cup in hand, studying something outside the window. He didn't turn when she entered. "Maria's making eggs. You'll watch how she does it." Maria worked at the stove, movements automatic from years of practice. Bacon grease popped in the cast-iron skillet. She cracked eggs one-handed, shells into a bucket by her feet, salt from a box, pepper from a tin. The boys sat at the table, waiting. Daniel had combed his hair with the water, the tracks still visible. Tommy stuck up in back like wheat after wind. "Sit," Maria said to Sarah. "Watch." The eggs came out perfect, whites set, yolks soft. Maria slid them onto plates, added bacon, biscuits from a covered basket. The boys ate without talking, forks scraping ceramic. Jake took his plate, disappeared toward the barn. "Tomorrow, you do this," Maria pointed at the stove. "Wood here? Check heat with hand this far. No closer? Grease must dance, but not smoke." Sarah nodded, trying to memorize the distance between Maria's hand and the skillet. "Biscuits made last night. Dough rises there." She pointed to a bowl on the warming shelf, covered with a flour sack towel. "Shape, bake. Boys eat 4 each. Mr. Jake, 3. The boys finished eating, pushed back their chairs. Daniel carried both plates to the wash basin. "We got chores," he told Sarah, not asking permission, just informing. They went out the back door, letting it bang. Maria untied her apron, hung it on a peg. "Beans in the pot, soaking since yesterday. Cook slow, stir every time you pass, add water if needed." She moved toward the door, stopped. "The boys know what they need. Don't chase them. Let them come." Then Sarah was alone. The kitchen felt larger without Maria filling it. Sarah found coffee, poured a cup. It was strong enough to float nails, but it helped clear her head. She checked the beans, brown soup beans in a heavy pot, water covering them by 2 inches. The fire needed wood. She added 2 pieces, watched the flames catch. Through the window, she saw the boys at their work. Daniel scattered feed for the chickens, his movements precise, no waste. Tommy gathered eggs, reaching under his that pecked his hands. He didn't flinch to 8 and 6. Jake had said, but they moved like children who'd learned early that nobody would do their work for them. Sarah stirred the beans, added a piece of salt pork from the larder, an onion. Maria hadn't said 2, but beans needed flavor. The familiar motion knife through onion. The sting in her eyes brought back her own kitchen, before the war, before James came back wrong in the head, before the fever took him. She pushed the memory down. That life was dead. This life needed attention. Footsteps on the porch. The boys came in. Tommy carrying the egg basket. Daniel with an armload of split wood. They stacked the wood by the stove, put the eggs in a crock on the counter. Still no words to her, just around her. "I need the milk," Daniel said to the air between them. "Primer's on the shelf," Sarah said. "When you're done, we'll do letters." He looked at her then, really looked. His eyes were Jake's, dark, measuring. "You know letters. I know enough." He left without answering. Tommy stayed, standing by the door like he might run. "You want to help with the bread?" He shook his head, but moved closer. Sarah found the dough Maria had mentioned, turned it onto the floured board. It was ready, doubled in size, soft but not sticky. She shaped it into rounds, hands remembering the motion. Tommy watched from across the table. "Ma used to make braids," he said. "With the bread." Sarah's hands stopped. First mention of the mother. She kept her voice level. "Want to see if I can make one?" He nodded. She divided the dough, rolled 3 long pieces, showed him how to weave them. His face changed, almost smiled. "That's right, like Ma's." The bread went into the oven. Sarah checked the beans, stirred. Tommy had moved to the window, looking out. "What's that for?" Sarah pointed to his collection on the sill rocks. Feathers, what looked like dried flowers. Just things. But he picked up a blue feather, smooth and perfect. "This is from a jay. They're mean but pretty, like some people." That got an actual smile, small but real. Daniel came back with the milk pail, set it on the counter. Bessie kicked. She always kicks. "Your hand all right?" He held it up, red mark across the knuckles, but not bleeding. "Had worse." Sarah strained the milk through cheesecloth into jugs. Daniel watched, waiting for her to do it wrong, probably. When she didn't, he got the slate from the shelf. "Tommy knows his letters to me. I know them all. Plus some words." They worked at the table while the beans cooked. Daniel's handwriting was careful. Tommy's still finding its way. Sarah showed them how to make the letters cleaner, how to hold the chalk better. They accepted her corrections without argument, but without enthusiasm either. Teachers had come and gone. Why invest in this one? The bread came out golden. The beans had thickened, started to smell right. Sarah found bowls, spoons. The boys ate without being told, mechanical. Daniel broke his bread into pieces, soaked each one. Tommy ate his beans separate from his bread. Everything in order. "Father won't be back till dark," Daniel said. "He's checking the north pasture fence." Sarah nodded. The afternoon stretched ahead. She washed dishes while the boys disappeared again, more chores. Or just avoiding her. Through the window, she saw them by the barn. Daniel showing Tommy something about a rope. How to tie it, maybe. Taking care of each other because nobody else would do it steady. She started supper more beans, cornbread from meal and buttermilk. Simple food, but filling. The sun dropped toward the horizon. The boys came in as shadows grew long, washed their hands without being told. They ate at the table, 3 people pretending this was normal. Jake's horse sounded in the yard just after dark. He came in, hat first on the peg, then coat. His eyes swept the kitchen boys fed, dishes done, lamp lit. He took his plate without words, went through the door to the main room. Sarah heard his chair creak, his fork against the plate. The boys started toward their room. "Wait!" Sarah pulled the braid of bread from where she'd saved it, broke it in half. "For later, if you get hungry." Tommy took his piece, held it careful, like it might break. Daniel hesitated, then took his, "It's like Ma's." Tommy told his brother. Daniel's face went still, that particular stillness of a child holding back feelings. He looked at Sarah, and for the first time, she saw past his caution to what lived under it, fear, not of her, but of hoping. "Ma's was better," he said, but he kept the bread. They went to their room. Sarah heard them talking low, couldn't make out words. She banked the fire the way Maria had shown, her coals pushed back. Airflow reduced, but not stopped. Her hands shook a little, from tired, not hunger. Tomorrow she'd be stronger. Tomorrow she'd do better. Jake came back through the kitchen, set his empty plate by the basin. "Boys ate?" "Yes." "They give you trouble?" "No." He studied her, that same measuring look Daniel had. "The last one tried too hard, made them nervous?" Sarah waited, but he didn't say more. He went out to the porch. She heard his chair, smelled pipe tobacco through the window. She washed his plate, dried it, put it away. Everything in its place, everything quiet. When she turned toward her room, something on the table caught her eye. A yellow prairie rose, wilted but still whole, laid beside where her plate would be at breakfast. No note, no explanation, just the flower. She picked it up, careful of the thorns, put it in a cup with water. It might last another day, might not. But someone Tommy probably had thought to leave it. The scratches on her bedroom wall made more sense now. 4 groups of 7 marks. 4 women counting days like prisoners. The last one tried too hard. Jake said, "What about the others? Too soft, too harsh, too much." Sarah ran her finger over the marks. Tomorrow would be day 2. She wouldn't add to these scratches. Whatever drove those women away or got them sent away, she'd face it different. But as she lay down, still dressed except for shoes, she heard footsteps overhead again. Slow, deliberate. Not Jake. He was still on the porch. Someone else in the house. Someone she hadn't met yet. The footsteps stopped directly above her room. A board creaked, like someone shifting weight. Then a sound that made her blood cold, a child crying. Not the boys. Their room was down the hall. This crying came from above, from a room that should be empty. The crying stopped before Sarah could stand. Footsteps crossed overhead, quick and light. Then Jake's voice from the porch. "Tommy, get back in bed." Not from above, from the hallway. Sarah's door opened. She'd forgotten to latch it, and Tommy stood there in his nightshirt, face wet. "I had the dream again." Sarah sat up. The boy shivered in the doorway, waiting for permission to enter or orders to leave. "Come here." He crossed to the bed, climbed up beside her. His feet were ice through the thin cotton. She pulled the blanket over him. What dream? The ground eating her up. His voice came out thick. "Ma, the box going down and the dirt covering it, and she can't breathe under there." Sarah's hand found his shoulder. Small bones under soft skin. "She's not under there. That's just what's left behind, like when a snake sheds its skin." "Where is she then?" "I don't know." "Nobody knows for sure." He pressed closer. She felt his ribs expand with each breath, too fast at first, then slowing. Jake's chair creaked on the porch. He'd heard was letting her handle it. "Tell me about school," Tommy said. "About when you were little." Sarah hadn't mentioned school, but these boys noticed everything. They'd seen her writing, how she held books. "We had one room, 22 students when everyone came, but usually less. Harvest time, only 5 or 6. Did you have a slate?" "I shared one with my sister. She was older, so she got it mornings." Tommy's breathing steadied. His weight settled heavier against her side. What happened to her? "She grew up, married a man with a lumber mill, lives in Oregon now." Not true. Anne died of childbed fever 10 years ago. But Tommy didn't need that truth. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes." The last one said that too. His eyes closed. Sarah waited until his breathing deepened, then carried him back to his room. Daniel sat up when she entered. "He bother you?" "No." She laid Tommy in his bed, covered him. He had a dream. Daniel watched her tuck the blanket around his brother. "He gets them when things change." She started to leave. Daniel's voice stopped her. "There's no room upstairs, just storage." I heard footsteps. "Rats, big ones. Father keeps meaning to put poison up there." Their eyes met. He was lying, but she didn't push. Every house had its locked rooms. 2 weeks ground passed like grain through a mill. Sarah learned the rhythm up before the rooster. Coffee started. Breakfast when Maria arrived. The Mexican woman still came mornings, but now she watched more than worked. Sarah's biscuits came out right more often than not. Her eggs didn't stick. The boys ate what she made. Better, Maria said on the 14th morning, watching Sarah flip bacon without breaking it. "You learn." After Maria left, the real day started. Sarah had found boards in the barn, smooth enough to write on with charcoal. She propped them against the kitchen wall where light hit best. "Cat," Tommy read, following her letters. "C-A-T. Good. Now you write it." His tongue stuck out as he concentrated. The letters came out crooked, but readable. Daniel worked on harder words: horse, fence, water. His spelling was mostly guesswork, but he knew numbers solid, could add columns in his head faster than Sarah could on paper. "That's wrong," he said, pointing at her division. 36 divided by 4 is 9, not 8. She checked. He was right. "Show me how you do it." He drew groups of marks, separated them equal. His method was different from what schools taught, but it worked. Who showed you that nobody just makes sense? After lessons came the teaching Sarah needed, which hen laid where, what the milk cow's moods meant, how to tell when rain was coming by, how the horses stood. The boys were patient teachers, serious about information that mattered. "See how Bessie's tail swishes." Daniel pointed from the barn door. "She's got flies. Means storm coming. Flies bite more before rain." Tommy showed her his collections, explaining each treasure. "This rock has gold in it, maybe. See the shiny parts? That's mica," Daniel said. "Fool's gold. Still pretty." Tommy held it to the light. The flecks caught sun like tiny mirrors. They worked through the day, Sarah with the endless cooking, washing, mending. The boys with their chores that seemed too big for children but got done anyway. Jake stayed gone dawn to dark, riding fence, checking cattle, whatever kept a ranch running. Supper had become their one shared meal. Jake still took his plate to the main room most nights, but sometimes he stayed. Especially when the boys asked questions about the ranch, about cattle, about things that mattered to the work. This night, 2 weeks in, he stayed at the table after eating. The boys had gone to feed the barn cats. Sarah washed dishes, aware of him watching. "You're doing better than the others." She kept washing. How many others? 3. First one lasted 2 days. Couldn't take the isolation. Second one stayed 3 weeks but wanted more than I was offering. Third one tried to make them forget their mother. Sarah dried a plate, put it in its place. "Can't make anyone forget. Can only add new things alongside the old." Jake's chair creaked as he leaned back. Rebecca came from St. Louis. Her father was a judge. She could have married better than a rancher. Sarah waited. Men talked when ready, not when pushed. She read to them every night. Same book over and over, Pilgrim's Progress. Tommy was too young to understand it, but he liked her voice. He asked me about school, about stories. "You know any?" "Some. My husband was a teacher." The words came out before she could stop them. First, real information about her past. Jake didn't ask the obvious, what happened to him. People out here knew that widows were common as fence posts. Rebecca played piano. "There's one in the main room, covered up. Nobody's touched it since." Through the window, Sarah saw the boys coming back. Tommy carrying something careful in both hands. "They're good boys," she said. "They're what's left of her." Tommy burst through the door. "Look!" He held out a bird's nest, perfect and empty. From the oak tree, wind knocked it down. "Careful," Daniel said. "It'll break." Sarah took it gentle, examined the weaving. "See how she used hair from the horses' tails, and here that string from the feed sacks?" Tommy's face lit up. "She made it from our things. Birds use what's available." Sarah set it on his windowsill collection, like people do. Jake stood. "Boys, time for bed." They went without argument, but Tommy stopped at the hallway. "Mrs. Carson, will you tell the story again about the fox and the rabbits? After you're in bed?" Yeah, she'd started telling stories 4 nights ago. Nothing fancy, half-remembered tales from her childhood. changed to fit what these boys needed. Stories where clever beat strong, where orphans found homes, where people who'd lost things found different things. She waited until they were settled, then sat in the hallway between their doors, close enough to be heard, far enough to give them dignity. The fox thought he was clever, following the rabbits to their warren, but the rabbits knew he was coming by how the birds went quiet. Daniel never admitted listening, but his door stayed cracked open. Tommy sometimes asked questions. Tonight, he was asleep before the fox learned his lesson about underestimating prey. Sarah stood to leave. Daniel's voice came through the dark. Ma used to sing hymns mostly. I don't sing well enough for anyone to hear. Neither did she. But she did it anyway. Sarah went to her room, latched the door. Through her window, she saw Jake on the porch, pipe smoke rising in the still air. The night was clear, stars sharp as glass splinters. She'd been here 2 weeks. No marks on the wall yet, no counting days like a sentence to serve. The work was hard, but not harder than dying in an alley. The boys were careful, but not cruel. Jake was distant, but not unkind. She undressed, washed with water from the pitcher. The gray dress was wearing thin at the seams. She'd need to ask about fabric soon, about making clothes that fit, about staying longer than the others. A sound from overhead made her freeze. Footsteps again, but different, heavier. Jake was still on the porch. She could see his shadow. The boys were asleep. The footsteps crossed to what must be directly over her bed. Stopped. Something scraped, like furniture moving. Then a woman's voice, clear as spring water. Is she the one? Sarah's blood turned to ice water. That wasn't Maria. Wasn't anyone she'd heard in this house. Jake's shadow stood on the porch, stretched to look up at the second-floor window. His answer carried through the still night. We'll see, Rebecca. We'll see. Sarah didn't sleep. She lay still, listening to the house breathe wood settling, mice in the walls, Jake's footsteps finally coming inside. His boots stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The third step creaked under his weight, then the seventh, then a door closing overhead. The voice hadn't come again. Maybe she'd dreamed it. 3 days in an alley could damage more than muscle, could make a person hear things that weren't there. Morning came gray and damp. Her breath misted in the cold room. Through the window, fog pressed against the glass like something trying to get in. She dressed quick, fingers stiff on the buttons. The kitchen was colder than usual. The fire had died to barely warm ash. She rebuilt it, adding kindling piece by piece until flames caught. Coffee started. Biscuit dough from last night's rising set to bake. Tommy came in first. Unusual. Daniel always led. Where's your brother? Won't get up. Tommy rubbed his eyes. Says his head hurts. Sarah followed him to their room. Daniel lay curled on his side, blankets pulled to his chin. His face had the flush that meant fever. She touched his forehead, hot, but not dangerous yet. Stomach hurt. He nodded. I'll bring water. Stay in bed. She met Jake coming from the barn. Daniel's sick. His jaw tightened. Fever. Starting. There's willow bark in the pantry. Top shelf. Maria arrived as Sarah was steeping the bark. She took one look at the pot, crossed herself. Not the older one. Daniel, just fever so far. I check. Maria disappeared toward the boys' room. Came back, frowning. It's early fever. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Watch. The day passed in checking every hour. Sarah or Maria touching Daniel's head. His temperature climbed steady as sun crossing sky. By noon, his eyes had gone glassy. By afternoon, he didn't recognize them. Ma. He grabbed Sarah's hand when she brought water. Ma, my head hurts. I know. Drink this. He drank because she said to, not because he understood. Tommy stood in the doorway, smaller than his 6 years. Is he dying? No, he's just sick, like when you had croup last winter. I didn't talk crazy when I had croup. Jake came in at sunset, earlier than usual. He went straight to the boys' room, sat on Daniel's bed. His hand checked the boy's pulse at the neck, counting. Too fast? Get rags in a basin? Cold water from the well, not the pump. Sarah and Jake worked without talking. Wet cloth on forehead, another on chest. Wait for the heat to warm them through. Replace. Again. Daniel twisted away, mumbling about cattle and fences and his mother's piano. Should I get the doctor? Sarah asked near midnight. Doc's in Austin till Thursday. Besides, nothing he'd do, we're not doing. Tommy had fallen asleep on the floor by his brother's bed. Jake carried him to Sarah's room, laid him on her bed. He can stay there tonight. You'll be up anyway. They worked through the dark hours. Daniel's fever climbed until his skin felt like stove metal. He stopped sweating, bad sign. Sarah forced water between his cracked lips while Jake held his head. Rebecca died of childbed fever. Jake's voice came out rough from no sleep. Burned for 3 days. Nothing helped. Sarah wrung out another cloth. This isn't that. You don't know what this is. I know it's not that. Around 3 in the morning, Daniel went rigid. His eyes rolled back. His body shook like something had hold of him from inside. Turn him on his side. Jake's hands moved fast. Sure. Hold his head so he doesn't bite his tongue. The shaking lasted forever and seconds. When it stopped, Daniel went limp, but his breathing stayed steady. Fever breaking, Jake said. Maybe. Marie appeared at dawn without being called. She brought different tea, something that smelled like pine and dirt. My grandmother's recipe. Works sometimes. They spooned it between Daniel's lips. He swallowed by instinct. Within an hour, sweat beaded on his forehead. Within 2, his eyes focused. Why are you all staring at me? Tommy launched himself at his brother. You talked crazy. You said there were cows in the house. Did not. Did too. Jake's hand landed on Sarah's shoulder, quick and light. You need rest. I'm fine. No, you're not. Look at your hands. She looked. They shook like leaves in wind. 3 nights without real sleep, worry eating at her like hunger used to. Maria stays today, Jake said. You sleep? She wanted to argue, but her legs had gone soft. She made it to her room, Tommy's warmth still in her bed, and fell into darkness. She woke to afternoon light and the smell of something sweet, flan, Maria's celebration food, through the wall. She heard both boys talking, Daniel's voice weak but clear. The kitchen was full, Jake, Maria, the boys at the table, an extra place set for her. She lives, Tommy announced. We saved you some flan, but it was hard not to eat it. The custard was perfect, smooth, rich, probably used a month's worth of sugar. Maria watched her eat, satisfied. Is good, yes, my mother's way. It's perfect. Daniel pushed his bowl around, still pale, but upright. I didn't really think there were cows in the house. You also said Ma was here, Tommy said. You kept calling Mrs. Carson Ma. Daniel's face went red. Did not. Did too. Father heard it. Jake stood, ended the argument by movement. Boys need rest, real rest, in beds. They went without fuss, worn out from worry. Maria cleaned up, humming something in Spanish. Sarah helped dry. Hands steady now. You did good, Maria said. Some women, they run when children get sick. Afraid of catching or afraid of losing. Running doesn't change what happens. No, but some think it does. After Maria left, Sarah sat on the porch. First time, the chair was rough pine, probably made by Jake. The view stretched to hills going purple in evening light. Cattle dotted the distance like scattered periods. Jake came out, took his usual chair. They sat in separate silences, while light died. Finally he spoke. Tommy won't remember his mother, too young when she died. Sarah waited. Daniel remembers some, the singing mostly. She sang while she worked. He mentioned that. The women before you, one tried to sing, sounded like a hurt cat. Boys asked her to stop. Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. I won't try. Good. They sat until stars came out. Sarah stood to go inside. You answered when he called for her, Jake said. When Daniel called for his ma, you just said, here. Should I have corrected him? Others would have. Told him she was dead. He was confused. What's the point? He needed comfort, not facts. Jake knocked his pipe against the chair arm, clearing old tobacco. Rebecca would have answered the same. Sarah went inside, checked both boys sleeping, normal, breathing easy. In her room, she found Tommy's collection, moved to her windowsill, rocks, feathers, the bird nest, all arranged careful, a gift or claim. She wasn't sure which. She was about to blow out the lamp when she noticed something new on the wall, fresh scratches next to the old ones, not counting days, shapes, letters maybe, carved rough with a knife. She held the lamp closer. 4 letters. Stay. The hand that carved them was young, unpracticed. Daniel's work probably while she slept. A message or plea or test. But as she traced the letters, footsteps crossed overhead again. Slow, deliberate. A chair scraped, then nothing. Sarah looked at the ceiling. The plaster showed water stains in one corner, shaped like a map of nowhere. She'd been here 3 weeks now, longer than the first woman, as long as the second. Tomorrow she'd match the third woman's time. If the pattern held, tomorrow something would drive her away. Or tomorrow Jake would decide she wasn't what the boys needed. Or tomorrow, a sound from above stopped her thoughts. Not footsteps this time. Music, piano notes, faint but clear. A hymn she half recognized from childhood, the one about gathering at the river. Jake was on the porch. She could smell his pipe smoke through the window. The boys were asleep. Maria had gone home hours ago. So who was playing Rebecca's piano in the sealed upstairs room? The piano stopped the moment Sarah's foot touched the stairs. She stood frozen, hand on the banister, listening to the house settle back into ordinary sounds. Jake's chair creaked on the porch. Wind pushed through gaps in the siding. Nothing from above. She went back to bed. But sleep stayed away, chased off by questions with no safe answers. Morning brought different troubles. Jake stood in the kitchen before dawn, coffee untouched, hiring extra hands for roundup, 5 men, maybe 6. They'll eat here noon and night for 2 weeks. Sarah calculated triple the cooking, all those men watching her, wondering who she was. I'll manage. They're rough men, some from town. The warning sat between them like a stone in the water. Men from town would know about the widow found dying in an alley, would recognize her despite the added weight, the clean clothes, the different name. I'll manage, she said again. Jake studied her, that long look that saw everything and gave back nothing. Maria will help with cooking. The first men arrived 3 days later. Sarah heard them before she saw them horses. Crude laughter. Someone spitting tobacco juice against the barn wall. She stayed in the kitchen, aproned and busy, hoping distance would blur memory. 2 were young, barely older than boys, interested only in food and pay. 1 was Mexican, kept to himself. The 4th was old, bent from years in the saddle, half-blind probably. The 5th man she knew. Carl Haskins had tried to buy her a drink that last week in town, when she still had money for a boarding house room. She'd refused. He'd called her names that made other men laugh. Later, when she'd been desperate enough to approach him for work, any work he'd suggested something that sent her stumbling back into the street. Now, he sat at Jake's table, elbows spread wide, grinning at her like she was a joke he'd just remembered. Coffee smells good, Mrs. He dragged out the pause, waiting. Carson. Her voice came out steady. Mrs. Carson. Carson. He rolled the name around like candy. Funny. You look familiar. Sarah poured coffee without meeting his eyes. Her hand stayed steady through will alone. I have one of those faces? No. I'd remember where I seen a face like yours. Jake came in then, dust on his boots, tally book in hand. The men straightened. Even Carl. Jake had that effect, the kind of authority that didn't need stating. We start at the north pasture. 100 head there, maybe more. The men filed out after breakfast. Carl lingered, pretending to adjust his belt. Carson, he said again. Quiet enough? Jake wouldn't hear. Sure, that's the name. Sarah gathered plates. Didn't answer. He left laughing. Maria arrived to help with noon dinner. She took one look at Sarah's face, asked no questions. They worked in silence, making enough beans and biscuits for a small army. The men ate like wolves, talking through full mouths about cattle and fences and which horses kicked. Carl watched Sarah every time she passed. His comments stayed just shy of obvious how some women look different, cleaned up. How a man never knew what he might find in unexpected places. How funny it was what hunger could drive a person to do. The other men didn't seem to notice. But Tommy did. He'd started eating in the kitchen when the hands were there, quiet as dust, taking in everything. Why does that man keep looking at you? Tommy asked when the men went back to work. Some men look at women, and it's rude, but they do it. I don't like him. Neither did Sarah. But she kept that locked behind her teeth. Daniel stayed distant during roundup. The fever had taken something from him, weight, energy, maybe trust that people who seemed permanent would stay. He did his chores, ate his meals, but pulled back from the small connections they'd been building. 3 days into roundup. Carl found her alone by the wash line. Maria had gone home. Jake and the other men were at the far pasture. The boys were in the barn. I remember now. Carl moved closer, blocking her path to the house. You was the one begging outside Garrison Inn. Heard you was selling more than prayers before that. You heard wrong. Did I man said you offered him anything for a room? Said you got real specific about the anything? Sarah kept her hand steady on the wet sheet she was hanging. Men say lots of things. True, they also pay for things. Bet Jake don't know what he's got watching his boys. The sheet snapped in the wind. Sarah used the movement to step sideways, but Carl matched her. I should tell him. Man deserves to know what kind of woman. You telling tales. Haskins. Jake's voice cut through the air like a bullet. He stood by the corner of the house, coiled tight as fence wire. Carl stepped back, hands spread. Just talking to the lady? Talk's over. Carl looked between them, calculating. Sure, boss. Work to do anyway. He left, whistling. Jake stayed until he was out of sight. He bothering you? Sarah smoothed the sheet. Though it didn't need it. Nothing I can't handle. That's not what I asked. She met his eyes then. He knows who I am, where I came from. Jake's expression didn't change. I know where you came from. Found you there. Remember, he's going to tell others. Let him. Jake moved closer, not threatening like Carl, just there. Sarah Morrison died in that alley. Mrs. Carson works for me, takes care of my boys. Anyone has a problem with that, they can find other work. Sarah's throat went tight. He'd used her real name. First time since that night. The boys are growing healthy. Daniel's fever broke because you stayed up 3 nights tending him. Tommy sleeps through the night for the first time since his mother died. That's what matters. He started toward the barn. Stopped. Supper's at 6. Make extra biscuits. Men work harder when they're fed well. That night, Carl tried again. Not with her, with the other men. She heard him through the window, voice carrying on still air. Funny how Jake found his cousin just when he needed her. Convenient, her showing up from Austin with no luggage, no horse, nothing but the clothes on her back. Mind your business, Haskins. That was the old cowboy, Bill. Man's family is his own concern. Just saying it's strange. Woman that pretty, working for room and board. Most women like that have other ways of earning. The Mexican hand said something in Spanish that made Bill laugh and Carl curse. You'll see, Carl said. Give it time. True nature shows through, especially with women like that. Sarah served supper with her spine straight as a rifle barrel. The boys ate quiet, feeling the tension. Even Tommy stayed subdued. After the meal, when the hands sat outside smoking, Daniel appeared at her elbow. That man said things about you. I know. Are they true? Sarah dried her hands on her apron, chose her words careful. I was hungry, alone. Your father offered me work. That's all that's true. Daniel weighed that, then nodded. He's still a bad man? Yes. The boy went to bed without being told. Tommy followed. Sarah heard them talking through the wall, but couldn't make out words. Jake came in last. After the hands had bedded down in the barn, 2 more days, then they're gone. I know. He started for the stairs, stopped. You could have corrected me earlier about the name. Carson Safer, maybe. But if you want to be Sarah Morrison again, you say so. She shook her head. Sarah Morrison had nothing, no people, no place, no purpose. Carson has work, that's enough. Jake climbed the stairs. The 3rd one creaked. The 7th, then his door closed. Sarah banked the fire, checked the locks, went to her room. The stay carved in the wall caught lamplight. Tomorrow was day 4 of Roundup. Halfway through, she could last that long, but as she undressed for bed, she heard it again. Piano music from above. Slower this time, sadder. A melody she didn't recognize. Then it stopped, mid-phrase, like someone had grabbed the player's hands. And Jake's voice, clear through the ceiling. Not yet, Rebecca. She's not ready yet. Ready for what? Sarah pulled the blanket to her chin, listening. But the only answer was silence. And somewhere outside, Carl Haskins laughing at some crude joke, planning tomorrow's attack on her reputation. She'd survived hunger, survived the alley, survived Daniel's fever. But this was different. This was about believing she belonged somewhere she didn't. About pretending Jake's dead wife wasn't still in this house, wasn't still choosing who could stay. About pretending that tomorrow, when Carl told everyone what he knew, Jake wouldn't decide she was too much trouble after all. The footsteps above moved to directly over her bed, stopped, then soft as breathing. Show him what you are. But Sarah didn't know if the voice meant show Jake her true self, or show Carl he couldn't drive her off, or show Rebecca she was worthy of taking her place. 6 months had scraped past since that night in the alley. Sarah's hands had gone from skeleton thin to working strong. The boys came to her with scraped knees and hard arithmetic. Tommy slept in his own bed most nights. Daniel had grown 2 inches, his wrists showing past sleeve cuffs. The morning started wrong. Jake's horse was already gone when Sarah lit the stove, unusual for a Sunday. Tommy came in with the eggs, set them down careful. Riders coming? Sarah looked through the window. 2 men on horses, dust cloud following. One wore a badge that caught morning sun. The other, her coffee cup hit the floor. Clay shards scattered. Hot liquid splashed her boots. Charles Morrison, her dead husband's brother, heavier than she remembered. Same mean mouth. You know him? Daniel had appeared, silent as smoke. Get your father, fast! Daniel ran. Tommy pressed against her side, watching the men dismount. Charles looked older, grayer. His clothes were town clothes wool vests despite the heat, boots that had never seen real work. He'd gotten fat on his wife's inheritance, probably, the money that should have helped Sarah after James died. The sheriff was young, uncomfortable. He kept touching his badge like making sure it was still there. Sarah wiped her shaking hands on her apron, opened the door before they could knock. "Sarah." Charles' voice hadn't changed that particular tone that made her name sound like something dirty. "Been looking for you." "I'm not lost. No disappeared from Fort Worth without word. James's grave untended, his mother worried sick." James's mother had been dead 3 years. But Sarah didn't correct him. Let him lie first. Show the sheriff his character. "Mrs. Carson." The sheriff looked between them. "This man says you're his sister-in-law. Says he's got legal claim as your guardian." "I'm a widow, not a child." Charles pulled papers from his coat. "James's will made me executor of his estate and guardian of his wife if she proved unable to manage herself." Sarah's hands went cold. James had signed something near the end, when the fever had him talking to people who weren't there. She thought it was about his burial. A woman who abandons her husband's grave, takes up with strange men. "I work here. Mr. Thornton pays me fair wages to tend his boys." "That what they're calling it now?" Jake's voice cut through the morning. "Problem here. He came around the corner of the house. Not hurried, but purposeful." Daniel followed. Then Maria. When had she arrived? Then Bill and 2 other ranch hands. Even the minister from town, though God knew who'd fetched him. "Mr. Thornton." The sheriff straightened. "This man claims Mrs. Carson is his sister-in-law. Says she's not capable of independence." Jake looked at Charles long enough to make him step back. "She's been capable enough to save my son's life when fever took him, capable enough to teach both boys their letters and numbers, capable enough to run my household for 6 months without complaint. She's my brother's widow. Was." Sarah's voice came out steady now. "James died 2 years ago. You threw me out the day after his burial, said I was no blood of yours, no responsibility." Charles's face went red. "You were hysterical. I said not thinking clear. I said you needed time. You said I was a burden. Your wife said worse." "Sheriff, I have legal papers. I have a bank account." Jake pulled out a ledger. 6 months of wages deposited in Mrs. Carson's name. She's employed, housed, fed. What claim do you have besides old paper signed by a dying man?" The sheriff looked miserable. "Ma'am, if he's legal guardian, we picked her." Tommy's voice cracked across the yard. He stood on the porch, fists clenched, face wet, Daniel beside him, hand on his brother's shoulder, but not stopping him. "She's ours. We picked her for keeping boys confused." Charles said, "Mistaking a servant for family." That was the wrong thing to say. Maria stepped forward, finger pointed like a weapon. "You know nothing, this woman. She sit 3 nights with sick boy, no sleep, no food, just cool cloths and medicine and prayers. You, where you been looking? No, you come now when she's strong, working, worth something." The minister cleared his throat. "I can testify that Mrs. Carson brings the boys to church. They're clean, respectful, more than they were before. The whole town knows what she was before," Charles said. "Found her dying in an alley like trash." Jake moved, not violent, just one step that put him between Charles and Sarah. "Choose your next words careful." Charles backed up. "Sheriff, I demand Judge Holloway's at his ranch," the sheriff said. "We can settle this there. All parties present." "My boys aren't going anywhere," Jake said. "Bring the judge here then." Bill spat tobacco juice near Charles's fancy boots. "Kitchen court's legal enough." The sheriff looked relieved. "I'll fetch him." Judge Holloway was 70 if he was a day, beard white as salt. He sat at Sarah's kitchen table, spectacles reflecting lamplight. The room was full, Jake. The boys, Maria, Bill, the minister. Charles stood by the door like he might run. "Let me understand," the judge said. "Mr. Morrison, you claim guardianship over your sister-in-law based on your brother's will?" "Yes. She's clearly unable. Yet she's been employed 6 months, managing a household, raising children. She's being taken advantage of. Am I?" Sarah stood. "I earn $1 a week plus board. I have a room with a door that locks. I eat 3 meals a day. The children I tend are growing, learning, thriving. How is that worse than dying in an alley where you left me? I never." January 10th, 2 years ago, day after James's burial, you said, and I quote, "You're no blood of ours. Find your own way." Your wife added more. Should I repeat her words? Charles' mouth opened, closed. The judge turned to Jake. "Mr. Thornton, you're satisfied with Mrs. Carson's work?" "More than satisfied. She's—" Jake paused, looked at his boys. "She's brought life back to this house. And you boys?" The judge's voice gentled. "What do you say?" Daniel stood straight. "She never tried to be our mother. It never said we should forget Ma. She just stayed. When Tommy had nightmares, when I had fever, when the other women would have run, she makes bread braids," Tommy added. "Like Ma did, but different, her own way." The judge pulled out paper, pen, started writing. "Wait," Charles said. "There's the matter of propriety. An unmarried woman living with a widowed man. Are you questioning Mr. Thornton's honor?" The judge's voice could have frosted windows. "No, but then I find no grounds for guardianship. Mrs. Carson is employed, competent, and by all accounts, essential to this household's function." He signed the paper with flourishes. "This matter is closed." Charles' face went purple. "This isn't over. I'll wire Austin. There are lawyers." "Who'll want payment?" Jake said. "You have money for that, or were you hoping Sarah had some tucked away?" The accusation hung in the air. Charles grabbed the paper from the judge, stormed out. His horse's hooves hicked up dust that settled slow. The sheriff touched his hat. "Ma'am, sorry for the trouble." After everyone left, the kitchen felt too big. The boys sat at the table, quiet. Jake stood by the window. "He might come back," Sarah said. "Let him. If he brings lawyers, then we'll deal with it." Jake turned. "Boys, evening chores." They went, but Tommy stopped at the door. "You're not leaving, right?" "No." "Promise." Sarah looked at Jake. He nodded, so slight she almost missed it. "I promise." The boys ran to the barn. Jake moved toward the door, stopped. "Sarah Morrison or Mrs. Carson, you choose. But you're staying." Not a question, a statement. "Carson," she said. Sarah Morrison had too much past. Jake went out. Sarah started supper, hands finally steady. Through the window, she watched the boys working, Jake checking something on Daniel's saddle, her family, if she could call them that, chosen, not born to, earned, not given. But as she reached for the salt, she heard it again, piano music from above, not a hymn this time, a lullaby, the kind a mother plays for children who won't sleep. The music stopped. Then Rebecca's voice, clear as if she stood in the room. Now, you can be her. Be who Sarah's hand froze on the salt box. Be Rebecca. Be mother to these boys, be wife to Jake, or be herself. Sarah Carson, who was neither maiden nor mother nor wife, but something else, something that didn't have a name yet. The piano started again, but this time it was playing a wedding march. Morning came quiet, no riders on the horizon, no papers threatened, just Tommy's rooster crowing late because clouds covered dawn. Sarah made breakfast while the boys did chores, normal. Except Daniel had started whistling while he worked something his mother used to do, Jake mentioned once. Except Tommy brought in 12 eggs instead of the usual 8, proud of his hen's production. Except Jake stayed at the table after eating, watching her work. "Maria's granddaughter is getting married next month," he said. "She'll need time away." "I'll manage." "I know you will." He stood, hat in the hand. "Been thinking about the upstairs room." Sarah's hands stilled on the dish she was washing, the phantom piano. Rebecca's voice she'd learned not to mention these things. "It needs cleaning out," Jake continued. "Rebecca's things. Can't do it myself. Can't ask the boys."
"You want me to? When you're ready. No rush." He left for the north pasture. Sarah climbed the stairs she'd never climbed before. The third step creaked. The seventh, at the top. A narrow hallway with one door, painted white, brass knob tarnished. The room was smaller than she'd imagined. Dust motes floated in window light. A piano stood against one wall, covered with a yellowed sheet, boxes stacked in corners, a rocking chair by the window, quilt draped over its back. No ghost, no presence, just things left behind. Sarah touched the piano keys through the sheet. Several were chipped, middle C worn smooth. Someone had played this often, probably not well, but with feeling. She lifted the sheet careful, folded it. Dust rose, made her sneeze. On top of the piano sat a photograph in a silver frame. Rebecca Thornton, seated, formal.
Hair pulled back severe, but her mouth suggested she'd been fighting not to smile. The boys had her chin, her high forehead. Jake must have taken the picture soon after they married. She looked young, hopeful, unaware that childbed fever waited in her future. "That's her," Sarah spun. Daniel stood in the doorway, Tommy behind him. "You're supposed to be doing lessons." "Finished." Daniel came closer, touched the frame. I remember her some, not her face so much, just pieces. "Like what?" Her hands on piano keys, her voice when I couldn't sleep, the way she smelled like flour and lavender soap. Tommy pushed past his brother, went straight to the rocking chair. "This was where she held me when I was a baby, right? How do you know that? Just do." They explored the room together, quiet as church mice. In the boxes, dresses that would never fit Sarah. Too tall and narrow. Books, poetry, Bible, the Pilgrim's Progress Jake had mentioned. Sheet music marked with pencil notes. "Play softer here, and Daniel likes this part." "Can you play?" Tommy asked Sarah. "No, never learned." "Ma couldn't really either," Daniel said. "But she tried. It sounded like—" He stopped. "Like what?" Like she was talking to the piano, asking it to help her. They spent the morning sorting. Keep, donate, burn. The boys decided most of it. Sarah just held boxes. Rebecca's wedding dress went in the donate pile without discussion. Her everyday dresses, too. But Tommy kept a handkerchief with embroidered flowers. Daniel took the Bible. "These should be yours," he told Sarah, holding out the sheet music. "I can't play." "Neither can we, but maybe—" He shrugged. "Maybe someone will learn." 6 months later, the upstairs room had become something else. Not Rebecca's anymore, not anyone's really. Just a place where things accumulated: Sarah's mending, the boys' schoolwork, winter supplies. The piano stayed uncovered now. Sometimes Tommy ran his fingers over the keys, making noise that wasn't quite music. Daniel had started teaching himself from a book the minister's wife loaned them, scales mostly, repetitive and careful. Sarah had 20 students now. Word spread the way it did on ranches carried by wives at church, by cowboys between jobs. The widow at Circle T could teach, more than letters and numbers. She taught children to think. They came 3 days a week, riding in on horses, in wagons, walking from closer spreads, ages 5 to 14. Sarah taught them in the barn when weather was good, kitchen when it wasn't. Jake had built proper benches, a real slate board. Mrs. Carson, why does water freeze top down instead of bottom up? Lucy Brennan, 12, too smart for her own good. Sarah drew on the slate. Who knows what happens to water when it gets cold? It shrinks, said Peter Vance, like everything cold. But then what happens right before it freezes? Blank faces. Then Tommy's hand shot up. It gets bigger. That's why the water bucket cracks sometimes. Right. Ice is less dense than water, so it floats. If ponds froze from bottom up, fish would die. Daniel finished. Everything in the water would die. Sarah let them think about that. 20 faces processing the idea that nature had reasons, patterns that made sense if you looked close enough. After lessons, the ranch children scattered home, except the Hernandez twins, whose mother worked late at the boarding house. They stayed for supper most school days. Jake had started adding their feed cost to their mother's monthly payment without being asked. Tonight was different. Tommy had announced at breakfast, "It's been a year." Nobody asked a year since what? They all knew. A year since the alley. A year since Sarah's life started it over. Maria had come despite her day off, made tamales and flan. The table was full. Jake, Sarah, the boys, the Hernandez twins, Maria, even Bill, who'd never eaten in the house before. Jake said grace, same as always. Almost, thank you for this food, for this company, for the women who keep us whole. Women, plural. Sarah's throat went tight. They ate, talked, laughed at Tommy's attempt at Spanish. Daniel showed off his week's arithmetic long division Jake couldn't follow, but Sarah could check. Normal evening, except fuller, except happier. After the guests left, after dishes were done, after boys were in bed, Jake asked Sarah to the porch. They sat in their separate chairs, watching stars appear. "Been thinking," he started. Sarah waited. Jake's thoughts came out when ready, not before. "The boys need legal protection in case something happens to me. Nothing's going to. Ranch work's dangerous. Horses throw you, cattle stampede, rivers flood." He pulled papers from his vest. "Talked to Judge Holloway. There's a way to make you their legal guardian, not—" He stopped, started over. "Not marriage. Just papers saying if I die or can't care for them, you do." Sarah took the papers, though too dark to read. "What about Charles? Won't he contest? Charles Morrison died 4 months ago. Bar fight in Fort Worth. Seems he owed money to the wrong people." Sarah felt nothing. Maybe relief. Maybe sadness for the waste of a life spent grasping. The boys agree, was Daniel's idea. He's been worried what happens to Tommy if something happens to both of us. 12 years old and thinking like that. These boys had learned too young that people left. "There's more," Jake said. "The arrangement includes inheritance rights. The ranch would be yours to hold for them till they're of age." Jake, "It's practical. You know the books better than me now. You know what each cow's worth, what grain costs, which horses to keep and which to sell." All true. Sarah had started helping with ledgers 6 months ago, when Jake's eyes struggled with small numbers. She knew Circle T's business down to the penny. "What do you want me to say?" Jake was quiet long enough that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I want you to say yes. Want to know my boys are safe. Want to stop worrying that you'll leave if something better comes along." "Nothing better's coming. You don't know that." "I do." Sarah turned to face him, though darkness hid expressions. "Jake, I was dying, not just hungry dying. My body had started eating itself. Another day, maybe 2, and you'd have found a corpse." "Sarah, let me finish. You didn't save my life that makes it sound pretty, like a fairy story. You interrupted my death. gave me work when I couldn't stand, fed me when my stomach had forgotten how to hold food, let me earn my way back to human. She stood, moved to the porch rail. Those boys don't call me Ma. I'm glad they don't. That name belongs to Rebecca. But they come to me with splinters and bad dreams. They bring me their treasures and their fears. Tommy leaves flowers by my plate. Daniel carved stay on my wall. I know, you know. He told me. Asked if it was allowed. I said yes. Sarah turned. Jake had stood too, hat in his hands, like he was asking something important. We already are what we are, she said. Papers won't change it. But yes, if it protects the boys, yes. Jake nodded, set his hat on his head, started for the door. Jake! He stopped. The piano, upstairs. Does it ever play by itself? His back was to her. Shoulders straight. Houses make sounds. Old wood settling. Wind through gaps. That's not what I asked. He turned then. Even in darkness, she could see his smile, rare, small, real. Sometimes I go up there, late, when I can't sleep. I can't play and my fingers are too thick, too rough. But I remember the songs Rebecca tried to play. I push the keys that seem right. The boys never hear. They hear. Daniel told me once it helps him sleep, knowing the house still holds music. As Sarah thought of all those nights she'd heard footsteps, piano notes, voices that couldn't be there. Just Jake, wrestling with memory. Just a man missing his wife but making room for someone new. Play something tonight, she said. For the boys? Will you come listen? From down here, some things should stay between you and her. Jake went inside. Sarah stayed on the porch, in her chair that had become hers through time and use. Above, the piano started not a melody really, just notes finding their way to each other, clumsy, earnest, trying. Through the window, she saw Tommy's face appear in the hallway, then Daniel's. They stood listening to their father make almost music on their mother's piano. Then they went back to bed. The piano stopped. Jake's boots on the stairs. He came back out, sat in his chair. Thank you, he said. For what? For understanding that loving what's gone and loving what's here aren't opposite things. They sat in comfortable silence. 4 chairs on the porch. Now Jake had built 2 more over the months, one for each of them. Sometimes Maria sat there, sometimes Bill, sometimes the minister's wife. But mostly it was the 4 of them, watching evening settle over land that went on forever. School's growing, Sarah said. Might need a real schoolhouse soon. Been thinking the same. That flat spot near the creek, good building site. The boys could help. Daniel's good with measurements. Tommy's got an eye for making things level. They'd like that, building something that lasts. A coyote called in the distance. Another answered. The night sounds of a working ranch rose around them horses, shifting in the corral. Wind through the barn boards, the endless Texas dark full of stars. Sarah thought about that woman in the alley, the one who'd given up on morning. She'd died there, in a way. What lived now was someone else, Mrs. Carson. Teacher, keeper of boys, maker of bread and lessons and quiet belonging. I should tell you, Jake said. Rebecca would have liked you. How do you know? Because the boys like you. They were her heart, walking around outside her body. If you're good enough for them, you'd have been good enough for her. The wind shifted, brought the smell of coming rain. Tomorrow there'd be lessons to teach, meals to cook, boys to raise. Tomorrow the work would continue, the endless work of keeping a ranch, a school, a family running. But tonight they sat in their chairs on their porch of their house. Not the house Jake and Rebecca built that existed only in memory. Not the house Sarah dreamed of when she married James. That dream died with him. This house, complicated and patched and real. 4 chairs, 4 people who'd chosen each other. It was enough. More than enough. It was home. connecting hearts. I need to tell you something about broken people finding each other. When Jake pulled me from that alley, he wasn't saving me. He was adding another fractured piece to an already broken household. 2 motherless boys, a widower who talked to his dead wife's piano, and a woman who'd forgotten her own name. We didn't heal each other. That's fairy tale thinking. We just learned to hold our broken edges together until they scarred into something useful. The school happened because other ranchers had broken pieces too. Widows teaching, children learning, everyone pretending wholeness until pretense became truth. That's how communities really form. Not through grand gestures or shared victories, but through people too stubborn to die alone, choosing to live broken together. This is a work inspired by a Western frontier story created solely for entertainment purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes of survival, community, and human resilience in the historical context of 1880s Texas, while maintaining respect for the dignity of all persons regardless of their circumstances.